Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna? No way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by
my
Nitin
church
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagna, the occasional but illuminating podcast. That's right, this is a podcast that's currently running in the keep the lights on mode. That intends to take heavy discussions and treat them with a light note and frequently leads to its listeners going, fuck it, pass me the lighter, I need a smoke. I am Tony and joining me, the lights, your eyes, your face, exploding like fireworks in the sky. The man they call a flat track bully. No, wait, that's a flat disc bully. A man who would have been a legend if only he were born a few centuries ago when the earth was a flat disc. One that he would have plucked out of thin air and flung like one of his French girls. Say hi, Captain Nitin Sundar.
Hello, Tony. Was it Archimedes who said, "Give me a long enough lever and I will move the earth"? Yeah, so
Correct.
give me a flat enough planet and I will fling it into the farthest reaches of the solar system. That would be me. Was that
Yeah,
Archimedes who said that?
It was
About
Archimedes
the
who said
lever?
that.
Oh, okay.
Archimedes
Was he
also said Eureka
naked.
while running around.
Naked. Got out of a bathtub and started running around naked. Yeah, as we all tend to do. I once did that when I got into a cold plunge. It was not easy to deal with.
But you won't believe this is the second time in this week that I have discussed this with someone, and I was the one who quoted the lever one
Wow.
earlier in the week. So, yeah, man.
Amazing.
It's a flat circle only.
Archimedes is hiccuping in his grave.
So, it's been a while. Have you missed me?
No.
Exactly.
It's been only like less than 2 weeks since we recorded our previous episode, which you have declared is the worst episode of Leftover Lasagna of all time.
Even
Even
less
talking
than-
about it, I think it was
It's
Republic Day.
it's
or
been
around
more
that.
than 3 weeks. More than
Okay,
3
somebody's
weeks.
keeping count.
No, but yeah. So there are two quotes, right? One is absence makes the heart grow fonder, and the other is out of sight, out of mind. So today's topic is basically, I want to say, out of sight, out of mind, right? And I think that's what applies more frequently, right? So in the interest
Okay.
of baiting Mohan K at the outset, let me ask you a tropical dry wash question. How how old were you when you first heard about apartheid?
I guess around 10 years old, probably. The context in which I first read about or learned about apartheid was actually, I think, through cricket. Because
Right.
following South Africa, who I think entered cricket or were readmitted into cricket, I think, in the early 90s. And I think I
Right.
started following cricket closely in the mid 90s. And I used to read up
Right.
everything I could on the sport back when I was actually fascinated by it. And I remember reading about apartheid South Africa back then. Yeah.
So, and how old were you when you heard about Mabo?
40, because I just heard about it. What is Mabo?
Exactly. Yeah. I heard about Mabo only last week as well. So, Mabo is actually the landmark judgment that happened in Australia 92, which I had no idea about, right? So, unlike other countries that England went and conquered, where usually sort of you had like treaties, whether it was in US or Canada or even New Zealand with the local indigenous First Nations, as it were. In Australia, basically, this guy came and said, this land is terra nullius, or land that belongs to no one, right? Which meant that people were never considered to have existed having land or any of those things, right? So essentially, Australia is a large continent, obviously, and then there is this islands called the Torres Strait Islands, right? Because there's this explorer from Spain called Torres, and for the longest time, Australia was not discovered. He managed to neatly pass through some bunch of islands close to between Papua New Guinea and Australia, and so that's why it's called Torres Straits, right? So essentially, all of these islands also came under Queensland, as it were, right? So sometime in 1982, one Torres Straits Islander, whose name is Mabo, basically launched a case after 200 years of occupation by, uh, the whites, as it were, to say that we've always had land ownership and this is the proof of it, right? So basically, it like took 10 years for the courts to rule, and then finally, that is how it got overturned to say, yeah, like you guys existed, right? So
Okay.
why I thought this was, and it was very surprising to me that we've never heard of it, right? Like, because like we follow cricket of South Africa, we follow cricket of Australia as well, right? And then there was like a active boycott of South Africa for racial segregation and stuff like that. But here it is strange that because nothing is physically being shown, right? It is that you never existed to begin with, right?
Ah, okay.
You still live
Yeah.
amongst us, but you are not considered having land or being people only, right? That you never heard about it, which is absolutely strange, no? Considering you spent a considerable amount of time in Australia last year also, and collectively, I don't think too many of our listeners also, I'm taking a bet, would have heard of Mabo. So I thought that was interesting.
I think unsure why we've not heard about Mabo. Maybe it didn't affect too many people probably, and wasn't in the popular news media the way apartheid South Africa was. And I think
Yeah.
also maybe partly because we grew up in India, and Gandhi and his connection to South Africa meant we learned about apartheid a little more readily. But I guess it's not just India. I guess most people around the world probably would say they've heard of apartheid and have no idea what
Hmm.
Mabo is. That
Yeah,
said, there are stories like this all over India, which I think we probably have never heard of,
absolutely.
because they've never really been in the media. Yeah.
Yeah. So the founding thesis of this podcast is that basically, as humans, we only notice things that are visible, right? You don't notice things that are systemic and unfair or labor that has been done, but
Mm.
you just never notice it, right? So the reason why this was doubly surprising for me, right, was because before I came to Australia, PDP gave me this book called Down Under by Bill Bryson, which was written
Mm.
in 2000. So, and basically there is one point where he is taking a train from Queensland to Perth, I think, and basically he is talking to a few white folks who are very knowledgeable about the land and country and all of that. And he mentions aborigines, and the reaction there is that they need hanging, all of them, right? And he sees this with a
Mm.
couple of people, and he closes the chapter there. And I was like really surprised because I read it this weekend, and I go to the local park here, and basically all across, right, all of the plaques will have stories that are like from the people of the lands, right? So they talk about Bunjil or Bunjil, which is the eagle that created the lands and stuff like that. And I think I also mentioned to you that Ballarat actually means resting place or bent elbow, right? But
Yeah.
how can it have two different meanings, resting place and bent elbow? What do you think?
If I were to hazard, I guess bent elbow is where your bent elbow is close to your armpit, which is a resting place for a lot of bacteria. So
Which is where
actually,
culture comes from.
you know what? Sometimes my son comes and sleeps next to me in
Hmm.
bed, and he tends to rest his head on my bent elbow. So yeah, that is
Yeah.
his resting place.
Yeah.
So there you go. Is that how it gets its name? Wow.
Bent elbow because
Muralidharan went there. Oh,
no, you can see what I'm doing, right?
it
This
is
is how you
actually the resting
rest,
place. Yeah,
right? So
correct. Makes
if you
sense.
think about it, it's been like a bad translation of something that is poetically done, right? So for our audio listeners, I was just making the most visible sign that you make when you go to sleep, which is you fold your hands and you
Yeah,
slant your head and rest it on your
yeah,
hand, which
yeah.
also needs a bent elbow for that to happen, right? So to call a
Correct.
place bent
Like
elbow
imagine Kapil
just
Dev
means
bowling,
resting
but
place.
you look at the horizontal
Yeah.
horizontal version of Kapil Dev in his bowling action. Which is kind of
Yeah. This is not
or
that
Baba
context.
Ramdev. Baba Ramdev also does the same thing.
Yeah, but the point being that it's such a beautiful thing, which has obviously been badly translated. I doubt like too many people pay attention to it, right? Which meant that I had this whole moment of saying what, like, because like every sort of sign off and that and this also right now has something that says we acknowledge the First Nations people and Torres
Correct.
Strait Islanders and Aborigines and all of that, right? So
Yeah.
and I was like, why is Bill Bryson's time so different? right? Like it was
Mm.
written in the 2000s. I went and checked; it was written
Yeah.
in 2000, and it was because like although Mabo happened in '92, Australia never had the conversation with itself, right? And then the apology for this and all came much later in 2008,
Got it.
right? So
Yeah.
essentially, what Australia used to do was for all the since the last 200 years, basically, they would take away the children of indigenous born people and put them in like white orphanages and stuff like that, and basically erase their culture completely, right? So
Right.
in
Yeah.
that sense, Mabo, counter to what we think, is actually foundational, right? Because it
It
took
is. Yeah.
10 years, and there's actually Mabo number 1 and Mabo number 2. We've all heard of Mambo number 5, but Mabo number 1 was basically the first judgment where Queensland government actually went against these guys, saying you can't even bring this case into court,
Mm. Okay.
and that passed by the narrowest of margins, 4-3, right? And then this landmark judgment came 7 years later, by which time the plaintiff Eddie Mabo actually had passed away and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
But I think like so the reason I'm talking about it is because then I went and listened to this podcast called Hi, I'm Eddie, which from the Queensland Library, which is actually really illuminating. It's only 6 episodes, and if
Mhm.
like me, you had never heard the story before, you should go and listen to it, because how do we not know about this, man? It still astounds me.
Yeah. Well, I'm not that shocked. I mean, there are plenty of things I don't know. So I
Yeah, no, so let me put it a little differently, right? Okay, is that this frame is actually extendable to most things, right? Like you edit a lot of podcasts, and probably the only time people come back to you is when there is like a 1 second glitch in an otherwise seamless production of 60 minutes, which I think Mithun Sundar also came back and said, hey, you didn't delete out the part that you promised to delete.
So your point is the flaws are only visible, as in the perfection is. I mean, no, there's a saying for this.
This
Not
is
coming to me right now.
99% invisible. I am Roman.
I'm Roman Mars.
Then tell go to sleep.
Yeah. No, like there is this thing they say, no, sometimes great artists would on purpose leave a flaw in their paintings.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. As a way to show that it is perfect, and that that
Yeah.
it becomes known for that single flaw that is
Right.
out there. I guess I do something similar when I edit my podcast. Yeah.
No, and which is keeping
The works
me
of art which nobody
in-
is actually watching or listening. But for my joy, I leave my signature in it.
I am McAdams. No, but like the reason I mentioned the podcast thing was because after I listened to Hi, I'm Eddie, which is 6 episodes, the last episode actually cuts off very abruptly, right? So,
Mhm.
and I checked on Apple, Spotify, and even the original upload, which was on SoundCloud. So I'm like, okay, who do I write to? So then on Instagram, I found the host of the podcast and messaged her saying, thank you for the podcast, but also, did you know? But the fun part is, if there was not this.
You bladed her with trivia. But did you know what?
No,
What
I
did you
said,
want
did you
to
know
ask?
that the last part was cut off, basically. I didn't say, did you know, Mom?
Put her to sleep on her Ballarat, basically, with boring trivia. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
what
but
did she
the
say?
point is, no, but the point
Why
is,
did-
if it were not for that abrupt cutting off, I'd never have bothered messaging her saying thank you for the podcast in the first place.
Correct.
Right.
Interesting. This is like clickbait, basically. Right. No, think about
We
it.
didn't do it intentionally. Yeah.
We started off this podcast talking about
Yeah.
Instagram Reels and how they're unwieldy and whatnot.
Hmm.
Very often we click on YouTube videos or Instagram Reels because we see the thumbnail, and sometimes the thumbnail has absolutely nothing to do with the video.
Nothing to do with.
And we watched the entire reel. We irritated that the thumbnail never showed up, and probably has even nothing to do with the video. And then we leave a comment. What is this thumbnail? It has nothing to do with the video. I think your podcast host did the same thing there.
But which video do you remember that did this?
I only remember
Which
the thumbnail,
had-
not the video.
It said like Niger at number 5 or something like that, right?
Yes. Correct. Which we have spoken about in the past on this podcast. Yeah. No, but plenty of videos, right? It's classic clickbait, bait and switch.
No, but something similar that happened was on Instagram only. There was one ad which got banned, right? Was the thing that they did was earlier Instagram didn't support links, so you had to swipe up to
Yeah.
supported links only on like ads or something. So you had to swipe up. So what they did was, in the ad creative, they put one small hair, right? It
Correct. Yeah,
seems
yeah.
like there is hair on your screen. So
To
you
force you to
swipe.
swipe up. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's a proper gray hair tactic.
gray area. No, but okay. The thesis is slightly different. Is that I'm not saying it's clickbait. I'm saying it is just
Of course,
human
yeah,
nature to notice. Like, absence is very hard to notice in of
correct.
itself, right? And that translates to many different things, right? Like, if you were to think of, I don't know, like the piece I wrote recently for my alumni newsletter, where like the only time I noticed my lunchbox that my mom would pack every day of school was one day when she forgot to
Wait,
put in the piece of
put the
chicken,
good
right?
stuff. Yeah,
The good stuff.
right. Yeah.
Or if you
Right,
like, are like the house has been cleaned, everything is perfect, but there is just like one place where something is off, then you tend
correct,
to notice it.
correct. Yeah,
So the question, therefore, is how do we get better at noticing things that
yeah,
when they're present, right? When they're not necessarily not there.
correct. Classic. I mean, one example that I can think of, since we are on Leftover Lasagna, which is a podcast that you and I co-host, and there is another podcast which is Bits and Pieces, which also we co-host. It is no mean feat. It's a feat of staggering import that we went 3 years or whatever without missing
Yeah,
a single episode of Bits and Pieces, where we
correct.
would do it every single
Without
week
missing a single week without an episode.
without missing a single week, right? So we did about 150 episodes, after which slowly the cadence has dropped, and now it's, I don't know, now it's whenever Jay Matadi, let's rock, let's do a podcast this month kind of thing. But we didn't know it, but there were quite a few listeners who reached out on that week when we did not put out an episode and said, hey, what happened this week? Where, how come you've
Yeah,
not done an episode? And when we didn't even realize that we had people who were tuning in week
listeners.
after week and listening to this as, dear listeners. So it was like comfort food for them, coming once a week. I mean, whether they were giving us feedback or not, they were still consuming
Yeah,
it, and it was doing something for them. And they only noticed the absence when actually, or they only noticed, or we only realized how important it was to a small bunch of people whom we didn't know or didn't know of, when
yeah,
we actually broke that rhythm, right? So it's the same thing that you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, even small little things, right? Like when people turn up on time and don't make you
Yeah,
wait,
nobody.
and
Yeah,
if
yeah,
they
yeah.
do that like consistently over and over again, I mean, which you should, but
Correct.
you never notice it.
Yeah, because the Overton window is moved and you take it for granted. But which is why if you're from India, you will always notice it. In fact, you won't, because you won't be there on time. The person will be there on
Correct.
time. You won't be there to notice it. So yeah, that's
Most
the
of our
essence. Like,
listeners are stuck in Bangalore traffic, which is why they're listening to us in the first place. So they have a legitimate excuse to be late.
through that.
I was listening to Late Over Lasagna. The other thing, since we last spoke about not using AI, I now use ChatGPT extensively because one of the things that it helps with is when you move to a new place, there are a lot of things that people take automatically for granted, right? Like if you want to do this, okay, yeah, this is the way to do it. But when
Right.
you're arriving first, nobody gives
Correct.
you that implicit knowledge of the system, right? So,
Okay. So you got a
so it
checklist
helps with,
of move-in
yeah.
move-in formalities from ChatGPT. Yeah. Good.
No, not move in formalities, right? This is like when you're operating on like muscles that don't exist, you have to pay attention to everything, right? Like if it's a
Hmm.
new supermarket which has an unfamiliar layout, you are
Hmm.
looking at where do I find this damn thing, right?
Right.
Except there are like 50 different aisles, and then the
Right.
first time you can either like keep going around and figuring it out till the 10th time, then you don't have to notice. Same thing as
Correct. Or you
with
use.
driving the car in different place or whatever, right? Or like there is this place called Bunnings Warehouse, which gives you everything from like tools to gardening stuff to hoses to sodium bicarbonate to what have you, right? So
Are you becoming a meth dealer unbeknownst to your friends?
so if you just wanted to go there to pick up like
Yeah.
one thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have to traverse the whole thing, or you ask ChatGPT like which aisle would you find this and what. And again, like if you find the damn hose, right, there are like 25 different varieties, and you don't know which one you need to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with all of this, it helps. But one thing that I sort of in the process of using it for research.
Just one sec. I have a question.
Yeah.
These things like buying a hose and all, how does ChatGPT help you here? I mean, have you already decided you need to buy a hose and then you go to ChatGPT, or are you asking ChatGPT what do I need in order to live in this area with this kind of setup?
No, it can be it can be both, right? One can be like a need arises, like you're putting out green bins, which are basically your recyclables, but also food waste and stuff like that. But it gets collected only every 2 weeks, right? So
Okay.
keeping it clean in the summer is a big task because it's hot as fuck and like there'll be flies and stuff like that. And you want to make sure that like you don't develop maggots in the bins and shit like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this is completely new construct. Now, if you see
Compost. Okay, good.
So
you can Google.
so
You
you're
don't
like
need, AI for this though. But
so how do you know? So what would you do?
I'm actually in the pre-AI era. In the pre-AI era, I used to do composting in Bangalore. So I Googled back then.
Composting where?
In Bangalore, in my backyard, I had a composting pit. We used to do
Because you had a backyard. How do you have a backyard?
backyard as in
Why do you have,
balcony,
like, a
whatever.
flat?
Yeah, not backyard, more like in the balcony near the kitchen, whatever, in the back.
It would stink.
It would stink, which is why we stopped doing it.
Hey,
ChatGPT was not going to help me to get it to stop stinking. It would stink.
no, it'll tell you.
In fact,
basically it'll
our
tell you
common friend
Okay, so-
Mihir actually was the guy who helped set it up for us because he used to do it extensively. He had a nice bigger house in Bangalore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, you
the
don't need to
solution
use
here
AI
is-
for this. Is all I'm saying. I mean, you can use Google and you'll find the
Of
solution.
course, no. The solution for this was to get stuff at the cheapest and quickest possible thing that will help me keep the bin clean for a year at least, right? So it basically said go to Bunnings aisle 55, pick up this hose for $10, get the sprayer, don't get the expensive one, get this one for $5, and when you're there, you can click picks and it'll say no, not this one. Go to the other aisle, get
like
one.
that.
Right? So basically,
okay, good.
so you basically optimized one, the time you spend at the shop, the price you pay for it, and never having to buy anything ever again, and wondering, am I doing the right thing? It's not like you can like knock on the door of your neighbor and say, hey, look, I'm worried if flies will lead to maggot infestation in your area. What do I do? What do I do about it?
I hope you see the beautiful irony in this. So you wanted to do composting in your backyard, which is a very noble.
No,
thought
I
on the
didn't want
first
to
side.
do composting.
They're
The
forcing
thing
you
is
to.
that no, you have
The
to
council.
yeah, they have a 4-bin system, right? The idea is to reduce what waste goes to landfill as much as possible. So one is general rubbish, which is red bin, which will go into landfill anyway.
Like this podcast.
One is green, which one is green, which is like your food and other waste, right? And your
Found in Hank's Kundi.
lawn mowing clippings and shit like that.
Yeah, then
Then the third
General
is
green.
recyclables, and the fourth is
got it. So they compel you to have these 4 segregated ways, which is fine, good. But so nobility was forced upon you by the city council, which insisted that you segregate your waste so that you can save the planet and or do your bit to save the planet and keep the environment clean, whatever, recycle and sustainable. In order to find out how to do this, you went to ChatGPT, which is running on I don't know how many gallons of water you spilled into the ether.
I don't care about clean planet. I care about clean backyard.
I know that. I hope the Ballarat City Commissioner, I hope you're listening to this podcast. This is where your idea backfires.
No, so what I wanted to say was essentially the more subtler and more important problem with AI that I noticed was that basically after a point I was telling it these things and it was like, oh, this is a classic Tony overthinking problem. I'm like, wait, do you think of me as an
Perfect.
overthinker?
Brilliant.
How dare?
I mean, it wouldn't have taken AI long to figure this out. I mean, once you started using it. I would say it's the least amazing thing about ChatGPT is that it figured out that you're an overthinker. But yeah.
No, so I said, do you realize this is basically availability bias, right? Like you've basically got the plane that comes in with bullet holes, and the actual things I know, I won't ask you. So obviously, you'll think I'm an overthinker. How dare you?
Very
So
nice.
no,
Yeah.
but more in, so that is one part, right? Is that even with people that we see, we only see the parts that they bring to us, right? And you
Mm.
assume the entire picture of them based on that, right? So essentially, what parts are absent you don't see. But the more subtler problem with ChatGPT that I noticed is that because it is predicated on sort of keeping you hooked and keeping you coming back, it
Mm.
generally tends to agree with you, right? So the way I did this was I read one Agatha Christie book which is called Halloween Party, which is made into a movie called Haunting in Venice or something. And I didn't know which era it was from, so I borrowed it from the local library here. And I was like, wait, this is a shit book. Like, this is not an Agatha Christie book at all, right? So, in the first window, I basically told ChatGPT like, what is, I mean, this is a terrible book, like, what's wrong with it and all that. So I said,
Ah.
yeah, your instinct is right. This is what it is. You value like fairness and payoff at that, and this is late stage. And I'm like, yeah, why is it preachy? And she's like, and they're like, yeah, Agatha Christie in her later life was preachy, that, this, and the other. And in the other window, I asked, like, so what do you think of this book? And it gave a completely different answer. It's like, yeah, it has this ratings. It is generally considered well read. And for a person with
Mm.
inclinations around puzzle solving and cluing and all, you will find it interesting, right?
Basically, you're saying it fills in the blanks for you depending on what you give it. And yeah, I've definitely
No,
seen that.
so it is
Yeah.
designed in such a way that it reduces friction for you, right? Which also means that if you don't use it with nuance, you will end up with a machine that says yes to everything that you say, right?
Yeah.
So it objectively didn't give different answers. It framed the answer differently based on my tone, right? So the problem, therefore, is that if I didn't pick up the nuance that it was telling me, because it does that, what is it, feedback sandwich, no? Yes, no, yes. So unless you ask it to objectively say something, it wants to sort of remove the friction, right? So what is absent there is friction, right? It's not like if you and I were discussing, you'll say, hey, no, what rubbish, you'll push back, right?
Right.
That's not
Right.
necessarily the case with AI. And
Correct.
the
Yeah.
more and more that we rely on AI, you will have this problem of you don't know what is absent, right? Which is uh,
You know what? I
friction.
actually disagree because I mean
Ah,
on this
there you go.
podcast
Yes.
itself, I think more than a
Yeah.
year back when we first spoke about when we started talking about AI in the early days of
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I remember we used to play Modi ji singing in Tamil and all of that. And we said, this is the best that AI has to offer.
Yeah.
It has come along a long way since then, right? I think it's a matter of time before the models figure out that they can't be yes men all the time, and that they
No,
need to. I think they
what's
will
the
adapt it
issue with being yes men all the time?
because it's not authentic, right? Like you said, I ultimately want to use ChatGPT to tell me what it is rather than to try and satisfy my biases, right? So if I bias it with saying, for instance, hey, what rubbish is this book by Agatha Christie versus hey, what an awesome book by Agatha Christie. I don't want it
Hmm.
to give me answers depending on the question I ask, but give me an objective, true answer which is balanced and helps me understand the book better rather than just
Yeah, but the
agree with
pushback there is you're assuming that, I mean, again, no offense, but everyone operates at this level of nuance, right? That's patently false because your own thing is about why you don't deem like excellent break free writing important in movies, is that that's not how people view movies, right? Like it doesn't, everything doesn't have to be elegantly tied back, and that's not why you enjoy it, right? You enjoy it for the whatever thing it is.
my point is, see, right now there is a whole bunch of skepticism around AI and the fact that
Hmm.
it tends to tell you, it tends to echo chamber a little bit with you for whatever
Yeah.
reason, right? And some people say it's as insidious as, hey, if you can confirm what somebody's asking it, they will tend to use it more. Other people say it's just
Confirmation
that the
bias.
models, yeah, it's confirmation bias. Other people say it's, it use it more, monetize it more, whatever. But other people say it's also just that the models inherently are still a little servile in the way they've been wired. And I think it's a matter of
Mm.
time before they adapt to become more of sounding boards rather than echo chambers, right? Where they will not just tell you what you want to hear. That's all I'm
No,
saying.
but let's extend the argument, right? Is that
Hmm.
if they increased friction and you found that the things that you sort of ask are always met with pushback, which is objective, are you going to keep using it more or use it less? Right? You will find some other alternate
No, so
source to get
no,
your
you're
this thing.
falling into the first bucket. I'm saying I mean, I mentioned two kind of situations, right? The first one being that, it is insidious on purpose because it can increase click through and usage. I don't
Yeah.
feel it is as straightforward as that. And they will find ways to do that while actually also delivering you more of the truth
Yeah.
and
No,
lesser of,
I'm not saying it is insidious on purpose. I'm saying that
ah,
it is hard for a average user, to me included, see the nuance in with which it responds, right? So if you,
yeah.
irrespective of which side of the spectrum you were on, if you were to sort of ask, like, ICE is doing a great job in America, can be a
Hmm.
question, right? And then it'll find ways to sort of objectively push back at you, but the first phrasing and the end phrasing will be in such a way that you feel like it is agreeing with you, right? So unless you are actually objectively paying attention to it, you won't catch the nuance, is what I'm saying. You will walk away
I'm
thinking
saying
that, yeah, ChatGPT agrees with what I'm saying.
correct, and I'm actually saying ChatGPT will get to a stage where it doesn't necessarily leave me wrongly feeling that it is agreeing with me by giving me, those kinds of words. I think it's not about whether, as a user, I understand the nuance or not, but it's about whether I actually come away with a more deeper understanding of whatever question I was asking or not, right? And a more true
But
representation of what the question is. And I feel as we keep using these tools, or as these tools
yeah,
keep evolving, and now that new models are dropping literally every week, right, across
yeah,
all the top 4 or 5
correct.
platforms, I think it's a matter of time before this gets sorted out, and you won't see so much of confirmation bias. That's my opinion.
Okay, so I think maybe the
And not because they're trying to correct a wrong or anything. I just think the models are going to keep getting smarter, and the purpose of the model is not going to be so much to increase usage or stickiness or whatever. It's going to be to just be more true.
No, I agree with maybe the first part, but I disagree with the second, right? Is in that you are saying new models are dropping every week, right? So
Yeah.
eventually you may not just have one AI, you might have different models based on the user type, right? Like even now, like the way you saw that Claude ad during Super Bowl, right? Famous
Yeah,
Super
yeah.
Bowl hater that you are. Yeah,
I don't know if it was Super Bowl, but I saw that one ad, which was this person in a therapy session or
that
something,
only.
right? Yeah, yeah, I saw that one. Yeah,
Not therapy. Can I get a
yeah, it
six
was.
pack and can I get funding or something like that?
Ah, no, maybe I've then not seen the
Or
ad
maybe there are
exactly.
multiple ones. Yeah.
Maybe there are multiple ones. Yeah, I saw one of them. So, yeah, yeah.
Where it says there are.
Basically where the other AIs now started or have claimed that they'll start including ads in their thing, and
Correct. Yeah.
Claude is saying
And
basically we will not be doing that. So yeah,
correct. So there are
we should
two
just play one of
through
those.
lines
Yeah,
in that ad. Is that one says ads are coming to AI but not Claude,
correct,
and then the
correct.
last frame is Claude keep thinking, right, or something
Hmm.
around don't outsource your thinking to
Hmm.
agents, right? But
Hmm.
so I think it is valid when you say that there will be many different AI models, and depending on what level of nuance slash mechanical precision you want, you might find one. But I would still argue that for 90% of the humans, you would want one that mimics humans, right? And human behavior by default, the way anything is structured is based on the understanding that the human brain wants to get from point A to point B with the least amount of friction, right? And if you
Yeah.
don't design your product accordingly, either people will find a way to do it or they'll switch to a different product, right? That's the essence of what we when we talk about human centered design and stuff like that, right? So but humans in general, I would say, prefer agreement over conflict, right? And I would say, like, there are, you can see this, I mean, the best way to notice this is in when we get together as people, right? When we get together as groups of people, there will be opinions that are put forth, not necessarily with understanding or expertise. And most of the time, you nod along because you want to be an agreeable person in the group, right? Not necessarily because you agree, right? And you're like, oh, it's a nice lunch.
What do you think I'm
Kids are
doing right now?
playing. No, so in general, humans like being agreed with, right? And it is
Of
conflict
course.
is not something that you seek out.
No, no, not denying all of this. Yeah, it's fine. So, one, I do think that what you saw with search, where ultimately, you had hundreds of search engines and 99 of them died, and everyone defaulted to Google. I think you will see that happening here also eventually, because
Yeah,
frankly, now, I mean, if you were to objectively compare Gemini versus ChatGPT for a certain use case, or against Anthropic, Claude, whatever, the results you get might not be too different, right? Them, because they're all,
yeah.
while the
I
fundamental
mean,
base models are.
you and I can't say because we are not necessarily the biggest
Oh, I
AI
use.
users, as it were. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
I'm
one do you
not the
use?
biggest user. Like, I I use Gemini because it's very convenient. It's right there on my phone, right? That button's right there, and it's an Android phone. I think Google has an unfair advantage here, and I also
Yeah.
think Google has really pulled their socks ever since. I remember we made fun of them when they launched Bard, and there are various other efforts to first crack this AI thing. But I think
Yeah.
the last 1.5 years or so, they've really pulled their socks, and
Mm.
I actually think ChatGPT it's in a bit of trouble. Don't quote me on that, as they would say. But
Oh, God.
no, ultimately you will default to convenience, and you will default to one clear winner, right? And in case of Google back then with search, it was basically they had the better algorithm. One of these people will eventually have a slightly better algorithm, and if not, they will. If they all converge towards equally good algorithms, which might be what happens, then the platform with the most distribution and ease of use is more likely to win. In which case, yeah, Google will be a tough one to bet against. But yeah, that's one. But yeah, I don't use it much for anything, right? That's unless what I used to go to reviews, for instance, earlier, if I wanted to buy something, if I wanted to compare one product against another. For instance, I've been looking to buy football cleats, which I use while playing Ultimate Frisbee, right? And I've had not the greatest experience with some of the cleats I've used in the past. So I've tried to and find out why exactly. Maybe it has something to do with the shape of my feet. Maybe it has to do with the way I specifically play,
You play
etc.
football
It's not.
also, no?
Unfortunately, there's nothing called frisbee footwear, so people wear football shoes when they play frisbee. Yeah, but so I used ChatGPT, not Chat, I used Gemini extensively to try and research on a couple of brands and a couple of
Mm.
SKUs to try and find out what to use. So my use cases are very rudimentary. I think people are doing far more cool stuff with AI
Yeah, but I
than what I'm
think the
doing.
problem is that our older generations have told us that you can't have something like this that lasts forever because cleats never prosper. So
Oh my god, sure. Wow. Stud driver.
no. So okay, just to round this up, right? But my argument is that if there is a universal AI that wins out, it has to be necessarily one that agrees with humans more and more because you're wanting to sort of take over more number of people than more computing users in that sense, right? Which is exactly what Sam Altman's comeback was to these ads, saying that Claude or Anthropic is only targeting very elite rich people for a very narrow use case. We have several bands. We are trying to capture the full market, and you get ads only in the narrowest thing and stuff like that, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, see, yes, Cloud is basically an enterprise platform, while the others are more direct user platforms, right?
correct.
So therein lies the difference. So Cloud will automatically get people to pay because they are selling to companies, which whereas ChatGPT or Gemini might not. Uh, yeah, I mean, they're going to show ads. The ads are going to look ridiculous. They're going to get better at doing it till, until they reach a stage where we don't realize that we're being served ads, and we will continue to lap it up. We'll see where it goes. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, no, but
that's what it
that's
is.
that's not the thesis of the podcast, right? It is essentially that you don't notice things that are absent.
You were talking about the Agatha Christie book. What was the book you mentioned, by the way?
Halloween Party.
Just give me a sec.
Not recommended. Don't read it. It's okay.
I don't. I'm
Oh,
not,
you're
I'm not
putting it
ready.
in Gemini. Gemini Ganeshan.
No, I'm using plain old Google search to find one thing. Ah, brilliant. Okay. So, I don't know if.
Are you gonna check if I've read the book? Or
No, I'm not. So, there was this Radiolab episode that came a while back, which talks about Agatha Christie. And it references an article that came out in The Guardian and I think in other places back a few years back, right? Around 15 years back, well after Agatha Christie had passed away. They basically did a research, they did an analysis of all the books that Agatha Christie had written through the course of her life. And when she was writing these books, nobody actually realized it. But and in fact, she herself,
she was
you
using
know,
AI.
she was not using AI. In fact, just the opposite. They actually found that with every passing year in Agatha Christie's life, and especially towards the latter stages, like the very late stages of her life, her vocabulary had diminished significantly.
Okay.
Like she was using 30% fewer words
Hmm.
than she had used in her 30s and 40s and 50s when she was writing,
Hmm.
as opposed to in her 60s, 70s and 80s. This book, by the way, was written at the age of 80. That's what I was googling.
Yeah.
So it is one of the
So
last
her
books that she
dictionary
wrote.
lost like many pages.
A dictionary lost pages, but basically she had Alzheimer's, which was never diagnosed in her time. And by looking at her books and doing a word cloud analysis of her writing, her complete works, many years after her death, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which I thought was quite a spooky thing to come out. And nobody in the day, nobody actually
Noticed.
felt, that
There you go.
there was a distinct lack of, a drop in quality in output
Yeah.
during her time. And this goes back to another topic which we promised we will talk about in our earlier podcast.
Oh, one second.
episode,
So my
but we didn't.
one challenge to Radiolab in this space is that you can very easily look at Douglas Adams' books and life and prove that he had undiagnosed ADHD, just based on like
This is left as an exercise to
access to
ChatGPT.
Radiolab. Yeah, because he struggles with plot. He doesn't care about plot. He struggles with deadlines. He's basically like creative and all over the shop. Definite case of retro ADHD detection.
Hitchhiker's Guide has a very good plot and through line. Right? I
Very
mean,
good.
it's not
Okay, fine.
unlike say an episode of Leftover Lasagna.
Okay, we're out on BBC in the 1960s or whatever.
yeah. No,
you said the topic, yeah.
So what Agatha Christie's thing reminds me of is, and this is a topic which we promised to touch upon in our earlier episode, where we said we'll talk about A.R. Rahman.
We have to keep
and
our
the controversy.
promises.
We have to keep our promise. We should come back. Miles to go. We said we'll talk about A.R. Rahman and the recent controversy where he said something and he said he's been discriminated against and he's not got a lot of work in Bollywood in the last 10 years, 12 years to be precise. And other people have come back and said, oh, that's because he has declined as an artist and the quality of his output has not been on par. Unlike Agatha Christie, in whose case people didn't really notice a decline in her times.
One second. The thing that I learned through this A.R. Rahman saga is that Ram Gopal Verma is a Teluguite. I had no idea. I thought he was some North Indian dude.
Yeah. His first film was in Telugu, and in fact, a lot of even the star of his most popular film, which is Satya, is this guy called J.D. Chakravarti, who is a Telugu actor, right? The guy with the beard.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of his films were actually Telugu films, and I think he continued to be active in Telugu even after his Bollywood days kind of dried up. Yeah.
So you're saying, unlike Agatha Christie, you can notice deterioration in A.R. Rahman's quality.
I have a theory that, forget A.R. Rahman for a moment because it's subjective. Anyway, I don't want to get into it. But I do feel that there is
What about Prabhudeva?
Some people are ageless. Our friend Mohan Krishnamurthy would say Prabhudeva never had anything going for him. So it's not like there is any decline. Can only incline from here. That is the situation. No, but creativity is a limited fount, is my limited point. Right, and ultimately the cup. I think we've spoken about this in the past. Ultimately, the cup gets empty for anyone who is in a creative endeavor, and it might manifest itself in the form of, I don't know, Alzheimer's or whatever kind of aging, senility, or a drop in productivity or creativity. But most creators, or most creatives, I think have a peak, and from their peak, it's always a steady downhill.
So, The interesting thing here is like
Unless you're like a
basically,
George Miller or something. You know who George Miller is, right? George Miller is the director of
no.
Mad Max Fury Road, the entire Mad
Oh,
Max
okay.
series.
Very good.
He made Mad Max Fury Road, which of course you might disagree because it's not your kind of
Set in
movie. But
Australia.
oh yeah, in Ballarat. Yeah, you might not agree, but most people do think is one of the greatest films ever made. He made it at the age of 80 something, right? And
Mm.
also, not only, I mean, the movie is not just creative in terms of what the storyline or script or the casting or whatever, but just the sheer production of that film, right? If you watched even bits of that film, you'll know that it was shot in Australia, and it creates a certain look and feel which is very unique to the film, and it's the kind of project that you would imagine a person in his prime, in his youth, would actually struggle to pull off. And this man actually went and did it in his piece, which,
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, basically
No,
the
but
exception to
here,
prove the rule.
no, the bridge basically is for sports people. You can see the decline, right? Because by the time you're
Physical decline is very obvious,
around
right?
40,
I think
yeah,
we're not,
it is obvious.
yeah,
But for
yeah,
creativity, like because it's subjective, especially in the field of arts and stuff like that, it depends, right? Like obviously, like so
yes.
the
Which is
question
why,
there
the Guardian
is it
analysis on Agatha Christie is interesting, because they
yeah.
took something that's very subjective and were able to objectively prove that it was indeed the case. Of course,
Because
at
the
least in her case,
benchmark
yeah.
was her own thing, right? But in
Correct.
A.R.
Yeah, that's the only
Rahman's
way to do it.
case,
Yeah.
yeah, in A.R. Rahman's case, there is also the thing that the market has changed, right? Like there is a product market fit.
Yes.
Yeah.
True, but it would be nice to actually benchmark his current work against the work he did in the 90s.
Yeah, but the
Nobody's
world
actually
has
done
also
that.
shifted, right? The world has shifted.
Forget
The
that. No, like
question was
assume the
if
world didn't shift and nothing
Rahman
happened.
was
Just
as
benchmark
old
it
as he
against
is
that.
now,
Yeah.
if Rahman was
Was
as
as
old as he is now, when he in the 90s and the early 2000s, would he have produced the same works or not?
correct. I mean, it's not an easy question to answer. It's much easier when you're
Yeah.
dealing with words, right? It's
Yeah.
vocabulary with words is a very simple thing to do. Maybe with music, you'll have
Mm.
to look at the number of tracks that are overlaid, the number of innovative
Correct.
new tracks that were used. You're right. The world of music changed during this period and all of that. It'll be nice
Yeah.
though if there is a way to quantify, right? And if someone
Correct.
actually undertook that journey.
Correct. Yeah. But one thing you do notice post 2014 is the uh, way in which what was apparently always there in a culture has become apparent is
Correct.
the emergence of I would say caste based and even otherwise superiority that has come to the fore, and the polarization and hate at a level that you never saw
Correct.
before, right?
Right. Yeah. I
And
think the caste
obviously,
based thing was always there. I don't think anything has changed on that front, unfortunately.
yeah, but
But yeah, the religion based
yeah,
hate, yes, absolutely. It's become okay to flaunt religion based hate in India. And
yeah,
that's something that's not latent anymore.
yeah. So it was always there, but you never
Yeah.
noticed it apparently. But it's visible now. So the question becomes, how do you pay attention to things that are below the surface and make sure you pay attention to it, or at least be aware of it? And how do you sort of be more grateful to the things that you don't notice because it's always been there, right? I think it's a tough one, but yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being morbid in the way I'm thinking about it. But there is this simple test now for prostate cancer, which has become one of the most prevalent cancers amongst men, right? And there's a
Okay.
simple blood test you can do, like, and it's not very expensive also, which will actually tell you whether it's an antigen test basically. I think it's called the PSH antigen test or something. And if you do that test regularly, it'll actually show you, and if you do the trend line, it'll actually show you whether you are likely to get prostate cancer in the future also.
Mm.
And it's a I mean, lots of people live with prostate cancer, and it's you can take tablets and get it under control apparently also. So I don't know why I thought of that because you're talking about
Okay.
things that are under the surface, and
Yeah.
but I mean the real answer really, I feel, sounds very philosophical, is to not think too much about the future and to just be happy about what you have in the present, and
Hmm.
thankful about it, and just continue to
Yeah,
exist.
which is
What
very
else is there
tough,
to do?
man.
Say more.
This is not an answer.
Okay, you give answer.
No,
Otherwise,
I
get
don't know the answer.
PSH antigen test only. That is the answer.
I don't know the answer. I would. The point is that, I mean, it's
Hello.
an important impossibility in the sense that, no, you don't buy the premise as being important.
No, it is important, no question about it. But it doesn't seem like something that can be that has a solution to it. Right?
Yeah.
How would you go about solving a problem like this
No, see, again,
or
like the way
dealing with
to
this
sort of,
premise? Yeah.
yeah, so the way to sort of like deal with something that can be there is to name it, right? Like when you say about how do you counteract bias, the first step is to explicitly call it out, right? Is that there is this bias that exists, right? Like don't make a straw man argument or whatever, or do think, have you thought about the availability bias? Like when you think of words starting with K versus words with K in the third place, obviously you'll think of words starting with K as being more in number, but that's not the case or whatever, right? So similarly, I mean, how do you sort of coach yourself to sort of mm, look at what has gone into the making of the sausage, right? I think that's what. Why are you
Why are you
laughing?
thinking so deeply, Macha?
We are at
What
the
is this?
scraping the bottom of the lasagna barrel.
No, no. I'm seriously, you're like somewhere, some level you've got to. அதாவது இது எப்படி இருக்குன்னா மேத்ஸ்ல எனக்கு மேத்ஸ் வராது. 2
Yeah,
into bracket open 5 plus 7 அந்த 2 into பண்ணிட்டு 5 plus 7 பண்ணணுமா இல்ல 5 plus 7 first பண்ணிட்டு 2 you somewhere you are thinking மச்சான். Like, ஏன்னா உனக்கு
yeah,
மேத்ஸ்
true.
வந்தது. Yeah, no, I don't have answer to all this. Like, yeah, I don't
Mm.
think so deeply about these things. I mean, it's uh, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's
sorry,
an asymmetry that exists in life, then,
correct,
right? Like,
true,
and we name it and we call it out, and maybe you don't deal with it,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. Ultimately, there's way too much out there that is not in your control, right? And it's okay. Yeah, don't
the
deal with
answer
it.
is chop wood, carry water. That only.
Chop wood, carry water. Exactly. Stop to smell the roses and to look at the people who are playing basketball by the side of the street and hope that
That
they
way
score.
only.
That
Yeah,
one
yeah.
only.
I'm doing the sticker.
You're doing the sticker. I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think
Sorry. You brought a great
that.
premise, but you are looking at the wrong person for solutions to your conundrum.
No, I don't think it has a solution,
Yeah.
right? It was more about
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what the approach is. And to be honest, it was kind of staggering to me when
Hmm.
I thought of like, I've never heard about Mabo, right? And
Hmm.
clearly, I'm guessing most of our listeners wouldn't have either unless they've spent significant time in Australia, right? So the way this conversation has changed, just to wrap
And
it up,
forget
is that
that's what I'm saying, right? So even if you look at, I mean, I can't talk about things I don't know, but we know what we studied in history in school, right? In Indian history.
yeah,
Firstly, at least in my school, I think they only taught us Indian history. There was very little of any other history that was even touched upon. But even Indian history, you got such a stilted, entirely wrong kind of perspective, right? By
yeah,
when you read about it,
correct.
right? Like
I mean,
take
now
someone
it's
like a Veer.
worse.
I mean, yeah, sure. Now it's worse. Like someone like a Veer Savarkar, when you were reading about him in Indian history,
Yeah,
I mean, the man was a bit of a crack,
yeah,
which was never covered in the way we read about him, whatever we learnt about him, etc. And
yeah.
similarly, like Gandhi has so many shades of grey, which were never touched upon. Right? We were only taught about the father of the nation being
Okay.
non-violent and whatever. Right? I mean, there is so much information out there. There's so much history out there that it's inevitable that you will not actually get exposed to everything. You will not learn everything about everything, and
Yeah,
some stories are
that's
just not
fine.
told. It's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, the counter to that is basically it is privilege, right? When you don't have to know about things of where unfairness has happened over a longish period of time, right? Doesn't
True.
mean you
Yeah.
don't have to go out and correct it actively, but at least
Correct.
being knowledgeable
Which,
about it
yeah,
is
is good, right? On
is
that
on
note,
you.
since it's on you. No, on that note, right? Like, since you're in Australia, one thing. So when we were growing up, again, right, the first thing people would say when Australia was mentioned is, "Oh, it's a rough country, it's a tough country, it's a racist country, and all of that, right? And that's
Yeah.
what I kept hearing as I was growing up. And when I visited Australia for a few brief days last year, the experience was the exact opposite. I found people were extremely friendly to a fault.
Yeah.
And when we went to watch cricket, which the trip was about, right? For instance, when we went to, or you go to any of the big cultural landmarks in Australia, whether that's the Sydney Opera House or the Melbourne Cricket Ground, right?
Yeah.
One through line that you see in all of these places and the events that happen there is the level to which the self-flagellation of the privileged white people goes,
Yeah.
where they are thanking their the indigenous people, apologizing to them for what happened. To that extent, I thought Australia uh, is maybe an exception, where as an entire society they have woken up. And you said, right, like even this reckoning really happened in what, 2008 is what you said, right?
No,
With the Mabo
92
thing.
was when Mabo happened.
92 is
2008
when
was
it
when
happened,
the
but
apology happened. Yeah.
exactly. So the reckoning really began from 2000, which is very close to now, right? I mean, it's very modern history almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Over a period of 15 to 16 years, the fact that the entire country has managed to build that level of contrition and regret and repentance for whatever has
Yeah.
happened in the past is quite commendable, right? I
No,
don't know
so
how much of
here's
it is
the-
window dressing, but from whatever I saw, it didn't feel like that. It felt very authentic and very genuine. And generally, I felt the people were very nice and outgoing and looking out for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good example of
So
how
two
things
parts
can
to
be.
this, right? One is that what the 92 sort of Mabo judgment triggered was obviously like the fringe elements which dominate media saying that your land is now going to go away because this thing has come up, right? And basically there's a fear campaign that happened for a long time, basically saying all of this would go away. But however, once the court acknowledged this, it didn't lead to any land reform or treaties or anything like that. It's just that, oh,
Right.
you people existed, right? Like it was not terra nullius, right? Like when James Cook
Right.
came here, there were already people who were handing land over generations, and humans existed here 60,000 years ago also, right? But it didn't lead to anything meaningful. However, what happened as a through line was that, like, post the apology, it became very publicly sort of endorsed, right? So whether you go to any
Right.
landmarks, like you said, or whether it's in sign-offs, or if you go to a school, it'll tell you which country you're in. Like, there are obviously many different countries
Yeah.
as the original
Correct.
this thing,
Yeah.
right? So it'll say you're
Yeah.
in whatever country or whatever. And so what has effectively happened is that in the last maybe 20 years, the school curriculum has made it mandatory for children to understand this, and the shift is generational, right? So when we talk about the insidious nature of hate and how it's taken over India and maybe the US and all, the reverse is also possible, where you're sort of tackling it systemically, right? Which
True
makes
that.
it all the more
In fact,
important, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, another great example is of course Germany, right? To imagine what happened in Hitler's time,
Yeah.
and to see where they are now. They're again like almost apologetic to a fault for
Yeah.
things that happened. I mean, the people living now in Germany have nothing to do with what happened
Yeah.
80 years back, but
Correct.
they continue to be almost to a fault, or to the extent that they're still continuing to operate at the other end of the spectrum in terms of being aware and
Yeah.
contrite. And yeah, so yeah, you're right, things can be reversed, nothing is irreversible, but
No, things can be reversed as long as they're visible. Is that you didn't have to? It's not like the people back then were any less friendly or anything like that. It is just that the prevalent wisdom at that time was that it never existed, right? So why are we sort of even talking about it, right? As opposed to like an apartheid, which was visible, where there was like racial segregation enforced publicly, where you had an outcry which led to a outcome that was different, right? So
hmm.
that's why the apology becomes a landmark in terms of turning it into a systemic sort of this thing.
Fair
And
enough.
what you see as overcorrection is actually sort of ensuring that this
It doesn't repeat, or yeah,
change propagates, right? Yeah.
true. Yeah. Agreed. We are at yes.
All right, that was
It's an episode,
An
of
episode.
leftover lasagna. Yes.
yeah, episode 47 apparently.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for joining us. If you've stayed this
Thank you for joining us. And yeah, and we'll let Tony go back to his composting business with a big hose.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, until next time, which is hopefully soon. This
See
is
you.
Tony and Nitin signing off.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Leftover lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna? No way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover
Leftover
lasagna is a
lasagna
podcast hosted by
my
Nitin
charge.
Tony and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.